Gullens, thank you very much for all the sponsorship, much appreciated as well. 8 partners, 50 staff, speaking 7 languages between them, and really appreciate fine company of solicitors that they are, who've been on the go, since 1949, when the Gullen brothers set it all up, so really do appreciate that. And I'm going to be doing the debate later on, the Rural Policy Group, with Catherine Lloyd, who's senior partner at Gullens as well, and also Under Sheriff of Kent, Stuart Nichols of Savills, food and farming for nigh on a decade. He's been their main man for that. Mark Lumsden Taylor, partner at McIntyre Hudson, big chartered accountants as well, special interest in food and farming. And then, of course, Baroness Bennett of Manor Castle. She was a Green Party peer, and she's going to be in the panel as well, and that's at 2 o'clock. After Mark White, who's on at 1, grocery code adjudicator, much more for that, and 11:30 Minette Batters. But beforehand, limbering up in the wings, delighted here, and we are 30 seconds away, so to keep me to someone who grew up on, I'm not sure if he's a fine golfer, he looks as though he could be, but Carnoustie, I'm lucky enough to know the golf course as well, in Angus. He studied agriculture at Edinburgh Uni, and then headed to Poland for 5 years to gain experience in the business over there before joining Angus Soft Fruits. And we're lucky to have him, and we're lucky to have him here today, of course. Supply chain excellence and so much more. John Gray. John, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Perfect. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for taking the time to listen. Thanks to the Worshipful Company of Fruiterers for asking me to give an update on my Nuffield journey so far. Firstly, a brief introduction to me. My name is John Gray. I'm the Managing Director of Angus Soft Fruits. We're a family business. We breed, grow, pack and market soft fruit, grown mostly on the east coast of Scotland near Carnoustie, and other parts of the world, supplying retailers year-round. In addition to my role at Angus Soft Fruits, I'm an owner and director of Oakland Fruit Farm, a strawberry producer in Evesham, Ringlink Scotland, who are the UK's largest machinery ring, providing a range of services to over 3,000 members, and of developing the young workforce, connecting employers, schools and young people. In the autumn of 2020, I was delighted to be awarded a Nuffield Scholarship with the support of the Worshipful Company of Fruiterers and the Royal Highland Agricultural Society of Scotland. First, by way of context, back, seems like a long time ago in 2019, soft fruit growers were seeing their production costs increase significantly, driven predominantly by rising labour costs. At the same time, market returns were fairly static, and so margins were coming under more and more pressure. In January 2019, Scottish Enterprise funded my attendance at the Oxford Farming Conference, where Henry Dimbleby, then researching the government's food strategy, showed this slide, which illustrates the return on capital employed throughout the UK food chain. Apologies, it's a bit small. The grey bars show the returns at various stages of the chain. As you can see, this shows that input suppliers, processors, manufacturers, logistics providers, retailers and food service operators at that time were all making high single-digit to mid-teen % return on capital. The notable exception, indicated by the red line, is primary producers, who at that time were making a very small return, and when subsidies are removed, it's effectively zero. As Baroness Boycott puts it, farmers get 9.2 billion of the 113 billion a year value of the agri-food sector. Where does the other 100 billion go? This is one of the great disconnections of our time. Primary producers, who take by far most of the risk in our food chain, are the least rewarded. Fast forward 4 years, and as many of us know, costs of production have increased to another level. The cost inflation figures shown are taken from a recent report by the Global Coalition of Fresh Produce, which is made up of fresh produce associations from across the world. Examples include plant material, which is up 24%, Crop protection up 31%, fertiliser up 60%. The report concluded that less than half of fresh produce being sold globally is being sold at a profit. This situation is unsustainable. Coupled with increasingly volatile weather impacting production volumes, this is creating unprecedented supply chain strain and has rightly called into question the UK's position on food security. UK soft fruit has been hit by the majority of these factors. Whilst many, such as electricity and shipping, are showing signs of easing, most are not, and the main driver of cost inflation in soft fruit, labour, will not reduce. It's in this context I decided to focus on my Nuffield topic, growing our share of the value chain. I'm focusing on 3 parts of the supply chain: breeding, production and marketing. And I'm visiting leading breeders, growers and marketers of produce throughout the world with the aim of gaining insights which could help increase grower margins in the UK. My journey so far has taken me to the US and Canada, the UK, Norway and the Netherlands, Singapore, Australia and New Zealand. Firstly, the role of breeding. Globally, soft fruit is a fairly niche crop. Until the early 90s, the majority of breeding programs were either public bodies, such as East Malling in Kent, the James Hutton Institute and UC Davis in Florida in the US. Through the 2000s, we've seen more private programs often aligned to routes to market, examples being Berryworld and Driscoll's in the UK. More recently, we've started to see some corporatisation of soft fruit breeding programs, examples being businesses such as the Spanish entity Planasa, and more recently major players such as Bayer and Rick Swan entering soft fruit breeding. Such changes could be viewed as both an opportunity, as this brings more investment and is likely to be made into this area, but at the same time could result more of the benefits being retained at this stage of the chain. Breeders target a range of traits, including flavour, shelf life, yield and disease resistance. The majority of current soft fruit varieties have been produced by experienced breeders with a wealth of knowledge and eye for detail using traditional techniques. This entails making crosses, producing large numbers of seedlings which are then laboriously selected over up to 10 years in the case of soft fruit. In recent years, we've seen an acceleration of molecular breeding, where DNA markers can be used to screen material before becoming seedlings, thus speeding up the selection process. Samantha has just given a much more comprehensive overview of molecular breeding. A novel example shown here is white pearl strawberries bred by Vance Whitaker at the University of Florida. Vance explained to me that they had identified a single gene controlling white colour. If they're targeting white strawberries, they can therefore screen seedlings at a very early stage, and any not possessing the gene marker can be eliminated, thus speeding up the selection process. Markers have been developed for a range of traits, as we've just seen in the case of powdery mildew, including other diseases such as Phytophthora in raspberries, and characteristics such as the presence of thorns in blackberries. Soft fruit plants are almost exclusively propagated vegetatively, the majority being propagated in the Netherlands, where there's a specialised propagation sector. Inconsistent plant quality is one of the biggest factors in terms driving variable yields in soft fruit. The concept of seed breeding and the resulting plants being grown from seed rather than vegetatively is not new. The concept is that traits can be fixed in a series of mother lines, and when these are crossed, the resulting seed is true to type and is called an F1 hybrid. This is the norm for a lot of vegetable production. By removing a lot of the propagation process, this should improve plant consistency and potentially remove cost. With the likes of Rick Swan and Bayer entering the space of soft fruit breeding, breeding from seed could become within reach in the years to come. Gene editing allows plant breeders to make very precise changes to DNA. This typically looks to improve a beneficial trait or to deactivate an undesirable trait within a plant. This is fundamentally different to genetic modification in that no DNA from other species is introduced, and therefore the change, or edit as it is known, could happen naturally. When in California, I met a plant breeder from business Pairwise, one of the first companies to utilise gene editing in plants, a process they term the seismic tweak. They are able to improve flavour, yield, reshape plant architecture, adjust the plant composition, create natural resistance, and also adapt plants for climate change. He explained that whereas traditional breeding starts with thousands of possibilities, in gene editing they start with one cell. Gene editing is now a reality. Mustard greens have double the nutritional value of romaine lettuce. However, they're very pungent, which puts a lot of consumers off. Pairwise, using their seismic tweak, have edited out the bitterness. The resulting product will soon be marketed in the US under the brand name Conscious Greens. Pairwise are already working on berries with the aim of gene editing out the seeds of blackberries. Another individual whom I met from a tomato breeding company questioned, for example, the need to have a calyx in strawberries. So it shows the potential to think right outside of the box. With the passing this year of the Genetic Technology Precision Breeding Act, which will allow the development and marketing of gene-edited crops in England, we're well placed to be leading players in Europe using this exciting new technique. I've visited production in the US, Canada, Norway, New Zealand, Australia and the Netherlands. Whilst there are a lot of similarities, different countries have distinctly different approaches in terms of technology level, as is shown in this table. In Scandinavia and a lot of Europe, the majority of the production is still in uncovered soil systems, so what I've called low-tech. This is also the case in the US, where almost all Californian strawberry production is still produced in the soil, heavily reliant on soil fumigants. Pressure to reduce their usage may push the US to consider substrate and tabletop production. However, most producers whom I visited were resistant to the idea, even though horrendous spring rains had just washed a lot of their crop away. In recent years, there's been much talk about vertical farming. Initially, these businesses were focused on leafy greens. However, several have started to look at soft fruit production. As this graph shows, vertical farms have the potential to produce very high yields per ground area and to utilise resources such as water very efficiently than even glasshouse systems. However, the increase in energy costs has hit these businesses hard. Many are relying on significant premium for their products, the market for which is small. One systems expert commented that vertical will always be cheaper than ground-based, vertical will always be more expensive, than ground-based systems. So unless you have extremely expensive land or a very high value market or an inhospitable climate such as in parts of the Middle East, then I expect these systems will remain niche. Therefore, of more interest is the Netherlands, where 60% of strawberries are grown under glass. Glasshouse production is a step up in terms of level of temperature and humidity control versus the mid-tech tunneled systems that dominate in the UK. One person that I met posed the question, is the tomato grower of today the strawberry grower of tomorrow? His view being that strawberry production would intensify in the years to come, as has happened over the last 20 years in tomato production. Glasshouse systems allow significantly more control over the growing environment, and increasingly we're seeing more sensors deployed to allow ever more data to be collected. I visited a Dutch business, Let's Grow, who have developed a data visualization platform. This allows tomato and strawberry growers to view lots of sensor data quickly and easily through various dashboards. It then also allows scenario planning, so you can model your future crops based on different factors such as market prices at different times, different costs of inputs such as energy, and different pest and disease strategies. In the Netherlands, I also visited Serthon, who design and build controlled environment systems all over the world. They have reimagined tomato production. Currently, most tomatoes are grown over a 10-month period in a labour-intensive hardware system, which is shown on the left. Working in collaboration with breeders, Serthon have developed a dwarf tomato variety where all the fruit ripens at the same time after 15 weeks. They envisage a system illustrated on the right where the tomatoes are grown horizontally and sequential plantings allow a consistent volume, and they're also developing an automated harvester so that the entire process would not use human labour. We should also consider the opportunity to expand our self-sufficiency in UK produce. When you look at the top 10 importers of fruit and vegetables into the UK, you can see that the majority by value come from countries such as Spain, South Africa and the US, where there are significant climate risks, particularly in the case of water. This therefore represents a significant opportunity for us in the UK to adopt higher technology, data-driven systems to increase our production of UK soft fruit, displacing imports from climate-sensitive regions. The major limiting factor to utilising glasshouse and controlled environment systems using LED lighting is energy, and we should be exploring how we can support growers to utilise efficient forms of energy such as geothermal to extend UK self-sufficiency in soft fruit. Amidst looking at different production systems, I reflected on our harvesting and packing processes in the UK. Our process starts with crop assessment by a field manager. We then harvest the fruit, where the picker checks the quality as they harvest. We then have a QC check in the field. The fruit's then transported to the pack house, where it has a QC check before it is packed, where the quality is again checked. We then have online QC checks before we have a positive release QC check before we dispatch to distribution centre. Commonly 7 pairs of eyes have checked the fruit along this part of the chain. Contrast this with the US and Australia, where they assess the crop in the same way, decide what to pick. The pickers then pick the fruit, quality control at the same time. They pick it into the final pre-labelled punnet, close it into the outer box, and that goes into the cooler, their cold store. It's chilled and then it's shipped to DC. When I asked the grower, surely you have to do a quality control check on intake, he looked at me and said, but we just check the quality in the field, so why would we check it again? So it strikes me there's an opportunity that we've arguably overcomplicated things in the UK, and there's an opportunity to simplify our processes without compromising quality or food safety, and thereby removing some cost. Looking to the future, in terms of automation, I can see how we may have some form of vision-based assessment system, followed by harvest by robot, the technology for which continues to advance and is now getting much closer to reality. These advances would dramatically reduce the labour requirement in soft fruit. However, I think it's important to note it's unlikely to reduce the cost of production, although it may go some way to stabilising them. Finally, I was struck by the diversity of different markets around the world. In the UK, as you know, the majority of fresh produce is sold by multiple retailers who operate ultra-efficient models. Private label dominates with little differentiation between stores. The UK is one of the most competitive markets for fresh produce in the world. This graphic illustrates that the UK prices tend to be at the lower end within Europe, in this case for lettuce. You can also see the UK has been less responsive in terms of paying more as costs of production have increased and supplies have come under pressure. This lack of responsiveness to supply and demand forces is driven by a move to longer term pricing, whereby growers fix prices for the whole season in advance. In other markets, prices are agreed weekly and in some cases daily. The result appears to be a more responsive pricing structure where availability and grower returns are protected to a greater degree. Contrast the clinically efficient UK supermarkets with the fun and colour of retailers in the US and Canada. Their shopping the fresh produce fixture is a much more disruptive experience, with a lot more focus on loose, which you can see in the case of apples, which is in Vancouver. Prices are also much higher and have increased significantly over the past few years, and grower returns have kept up better with increased costs. In the US, this didn't appear to have had a significant negative impact on sales volumes. In Southeast Asia, for example in Thailand, Singapore and Hong Kong, this is taken to a different level. Here, grocery shopping is often a nighttime, evening experience with stores within downtown shopping malls. There is a lot more focus on sampling, displays and branding. There's a culture of gifting of fruit and presentation boxes, which you can see here. There's also a much wider variation in products and prices. These Nagano purple black or purple muscat grapes were £27 for one 750 gram punnet, and the box of cherries in the top right, which were British, were £34 per kilo. In contrast to the UK, the majority of fruit and vegetables in these markets is branded. I've shown two popular ones here, both of which I had the opportunity to visit in New Zealand: Rocket Apples and Zespri Kiwi Fruit. Rocket Apples is an amazing story. Government-owned plant and food research bred these small apples, which are sweet and have a very small core. Given their small size, the breeder was told to get rid of them. However, one entrepreneurial grower had an idea inspired by a tube of tennis balls. Rocket apples are sold as a snacking apple, positioned to compete with snack foods, chocolate bars and crisps. Their main market is Asia, and as you can see, they have displays which we would associate with brands such as Coca-Cola and Walker's Crisps in the UK. John Laughlin, the chairman of Rocket Apples, pictured in bottom left, told me their story. He's managed and chaired several significant New Zealand agricultural businesses covering meat, wine, kiwi fruit and apples. He explained that with expensive land, freight and capital, New Zealand's agricultural industry focused on a small number of products such as lamb, milk, apples and kiwi fruit, and got exceptionally efficient at producing them. When discussing cropping performance, he also told me a humorous thought experiment to illustrate the danger of talking about averages. I'm going to give you 2 buckets of water, he said. One is full of ice and the other of boiling water, and I want you to put 1 foot in each bucket and tell me if on average you feel okay. His point was that whilst important to understand our average costs and KPIs, it's very important to understand your lows and highs and then work out how to move your average towards the high point. I also visited Zespri, who have a monopoly on the sale of New Zealand kiwi fruit, with the exception of Australian sales. Whilst monopoly marketing boards in most countries have disappeared, Zespri seems to have bucked the trend and continue to be highly successful. In partnership with Plant and Food Research, the same breeder as Rocket Apples, they have developed the golden kiwi fruit, which we don't see as often over here. It's a major step change in terms of sweetness and is very popular in Asia. Unusually, it's also a much higher yielder than the traditional green Hayward kiwi fruit, hence the big smile on this grower Julian Rain's face. I commented in my notes that if I had the choice to be reincarnated, it would be as a New Zealand kiwi fruit grower. Reflecting on the markets I've visited, I've concluded that there are opportunities near and far. Near meaning more sales locally, not necessarily at a higher price but with lower costs. In Germany, as much as 25% of strawberries are sold at the farm gate. This Norwegian grower on the left was probably the happiest strawberry grower whom I've met so far, possibly the only happy strawberry grower I've met so far. He grows 250 tonnes of an old variety Corona, which was mentioned earlier on, highly susceptible to disease, grown in the soil, no irrigation, no plastic, no fertigation. He sells all 250 tonnes at the end of his road end. When I suggested he grow a longer shelf life variety, he explained, my customers come today, they buy today, they eat the strawberries today and they come back tomorrow for more. The last thing I want is a longer shelf life variety. Far, meaning opportunities out with our home market, where there's an opportunity for differentiation and branding, as I've discussed. Finally, a recurring theme throughout my travels was the profound impact of investing in people. Not always the first priority in many farming operations. On my first trip to Norway, I stayed with a potato and lettuce grower, Asmund, shown here. He takes his managers, his supervisors and his tractor drivers, about 30 of them, on a 250-acre business, away for a week every winter, where they pull apart their season, analyse what worked, what didn't, and work out what they're going to do differently. He explained to me that the investment had been repaid several times over, as well as creating loyalty among his team. There's a Maori saying, and I'll not butcher the Maori, what is the most important thing in the world? It is the people, the people, the people. My conclusions thus far are breeding offers the opportunity to step change soft fruit varieties for both growers and consumers. A focus on high-tech, data-driven growing has the potential to increase performance and extend our season. We have the opportunity to explore new markets, both near to the farm gate and farther away. We will only drive our businesses forward through investing in our people. The UK has a gentle maritime climate with good availability of water in most parts, and we have an opportunity to increase our self-sufficiency in soft fruit, reducing reliance on more climate-sensitive sources of production. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank both the Worshipful Company of Fruiterers and the Royal Highland Agricultural Society of Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you, that was fascinating. If there are questions, now's the time. We've got the main man here. There are a couple of things I was going to ask, if it's all right. Can you just remember the stat that you said about, was it 119 billion, but the farmers are only getting like
less
20?
than 10%.
Less than 10%. That's amazing. Terrifying, but great to see it. Thank you very much. Rocket apples, brilliant. As a tennis ball, what an idea. And to see the gifting and the prices of fruit was absolutely brilliantly mind-boggling and just gave a great insight into the way forward. With the Nuffield Scholarship, obviously you've travelled all around the world as well. That was fascinating. How did you juggle that? Was that specific at that time you were functioning on that, or were you tying it in with your other job?
With great difficulty is the answer to that question. But I was juggling and tying it in.
Yeah, which was incredibly impressive, I have to say. And also, just remind me, Germany, was it 25% at the farm gate?
Yeah, sold at the farm gate. Yeah, up to 25%.
Yeah, 250 tonnes was another stat, but basically a short life. Because why extend it when you're going to sell no more? Was that what he was suggesting?
Yeah, exactly.
Rather than,
but also his customers will come back the next day and the next day and the next day, rather than sitting in their fridges.
Yeah, so it's a bit like buying bread in France.
Yes,
you buy it on a daily basis. Yeah, well, again, absolutely fascinating then. We're all going to come back as reincarnated Kiwi, New Zealand Kiwi fruit growers as well. Yes, we do. We have a question here. Thank you very much. The main man, Chris.
John, that was really interesting. Thank you very much. How concerned should we be about the current tie-up or with Bayer, rather, taking on the East Malling's soft fruit breeding program?
I am not probably best placed to comment on that. I mean, as I commented, if you look back to the supply chain and where the returns are, seed and plant suppliers are holding quite a lot of share of the value, so I suppose it is a concern. But equally it's an opportunity because they may produce quicker, higher yielding, better tasting berries that we can grow. So I think you've got pros and cons.
Yeah, good. I was just intrigued, again, having just come back from Norway for the World Cheese Awards, and it's a great sense of family and investment in people. It absolutely echoed in that. But they've got an amazing cheese community, which people wouldn't necessarily know of. There were 300 entries into the World Cheese Awards.
In Norway, an interesting point in terms of soft fruit, there's the farmers in Norway set the price and tell the market what the price is. They have an exemption to competition law, and they're allowed to operate as cartels. So as a result, the price of strawberries in Norway is pretty much double what it is in the UK. However, their yields are half, so you can take from that what you will.
Yeah. And how does that go down with consumers?
I think Norway is probably an odd one out. They have a very high income per head. They spend a lot more on food, so it doesn't seem to bother them too much.
No, Norway being a really good example, because obviously, again, with their fishing, a lot of huge amount goes, they export a great deal. Cheese, again, really good, really well supported, but obviously it's based on oil and gas originally. Yeah. So, remarkable. But when you see the quality of stuff, then it bears fruit. Excuse the pun.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, and then when he takes them away, Is that in Norway or overseas? But he takes his crew on this big...
Yes, they go away for a week and they'll get in facilitators and do a bit of team bonding, etc., which is relatively common for businesses, but I would say it's not very common at that level in terms right down to tractor drivers. But I was really struck by the loyalty, and they have staff coming back year after year after year. And as he said, his accountant initially thought he was mad, but now has admitted that it's repaying several times over.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, from the Maori translation, people. I mean, it really does feel like that. Yourself, with all the travels and what have you, seeing everything, in a unique position to be able to do that. How do you? It's a strange one at the moment. It's a tricky old harvest now with pickers, all the ongoing. We're going to be doing a debate later on about governmentally what's with goalposts changing. How do you feel about the industry in the UK at the moment?
I'd say it's in an extremely precarious position if you're talking about fresh produce. Ultimately, costs of production have gone up by around 30% over the last 3 years in the case of soft fruit, and output prices have probably gone up by about 10 in that time. So there's a 20% gap, broadly speaking. This year, there was probably about 10% less British strawberries produced than last year, and it could be going forward that there is less produced because you can't produce at a loss. It's unsustainable. And a good parallel is eggs. So the egg industry has gone through quite a lot of turmoil over the last 2 years, and that was because farmers were not getting the returns required. So what they did was reduce production, and therefore there was less eggs. Hence why you had egg shortages and you're only allowed half a dozen eggs each. We're now in the situation that there's 10% less eggs being produced, and we're importing eggs from Poland and Italy, for example. That could be berries in 2 or 3 years' time.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing...
Without the imports, because there's no real import area at the same time as British season.
Yeah, terrifying. And also the import-export, at the moment, that's a tricky one as well. But the statistic at the end of the war, the Second World War, it was 38%, I think, of family income was spent on food.
Yes.
It's less than 20% now.
It's now, in the UK, it's pretty much the lowest in the world, bar the US. It's about 7 or 8%, I think. Interestingly, we have the highest housing costs but the lowest food costs. It's the opposite in France.
Yeah.
So, but we still have the crazy situation of high levels of food poverty. But we've got the cheapest food in the world. So
Yeah.
work that one out.
Yeah, many conundrums, and the fact that if price is always the driver as well, but it's all about the bottom line.
But it shouldn't be. It's not about price, in my opinion. It's about value. And you see there, if someone's prepared to pay £27 for a punnet of grapes, I'm not saying that'll happen here, but we have seen a bounce back this year in terms of berries, and that consumers are buying more berries at higher prices in the UK. So they do see value in berries.
Yeah, I'm chairman of the Great Taste Awards for my sins. 15,000 products entered, and that little black and gold sticker. But people will pay more. You might not even know what it is, but they know that it's a sign of quality.
Yes.
And I think we do a great disservice to the consumers as well sometimes by coming down thinking, oh, it's got to be this and that, whereas actually they will be prepared to pay more. I mean, across the board, but generally, and I think. It's where we are, as you say. It is a parlous state and worrying, and I'm not sure. Governmentally at the moment, it's all about elections. Does someone really has to stand up and take some responsibility?
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, there you go.
Good.
So, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you so very much.